Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Got another Warhammer 40K video we're going to check out here. This one was requested by one of my YouTube members. Upon the nature of the demonic. This is a video by Oculus Imperia. I haven't checked out this content creator before. This was requested by, like I said, one of my YouTube members, so we're going to check this out. So I'm assuming we're going to get into some more natures of chaos and chaos demons and some more lore surrounding them, which I'm always interested to learn more about. So yeah, we're going to hop into that. We are doing this reaction live currently right now for said YouTube members. So if you guys want to come in and hang out while I do some of these reactions live and join in with some of our pre and post discussions, you can click the join button down below and see if any of the membership tiers would benefit you. As always, there will be a link to this video down below in the description and to the Oculus Imperia's channel. I hope I'm saying that right. I think I'm saying it right. Oculus Imperia, yeah. And there will be a link to his channel and to this video down in the description. So if you want to check out his stuff in this video without my commentary and pausing and talking over it, etc., you can do that. But for now, let's just get into the video here. Bada boom, volume, there we go. I like the graphics so far. It's a cool little graphical intro.
In the sequestered papers of Alana Celius, renowned scholar of the Immaterium during the era of the Great Crusade, there exists a rather damning tract in light of all that would follow her eventual incarceration. Within it, the scholar expounds in, it must be said...
Is there really like any even like incarceration in the 40K universe? Like, I mean, like... How does that work? I guess that this just like brought up a whole like line of tangent and questions, because like from what I know so far, 40K, like people that would be seemed like heretical or doing things against the law are pretty much just like purged, right? Like, is there even like really a trial or justice system? You know, what is the, I guess, like line where you go from just going to jail and being incarcerated or whatever to just you're done, you know?
Within it, the scholar expounds in, it must be said, rapidly decaying coherence, that the similarities of the religions and cults encountered by the forces of the Imperium across the span of the galaxy cannot either be denied or ignored. They are, she asserted, at the conclusion of a page marked with what appears to be human viscera.
Maybe I'm just going crazy here, but doesn't this looks like a bear paw, little toe bean right there, and there's a big one like a little cat or bear paw or something. I don't know. Look like a little cat just walked through the nebula. Anyway,
at the conclusion of a page marked with what appears to be human viscera, proof of a unified spiritual constant within the universe. A system of belief underpinning the great span of all human civilization, possibly all civilizations, from the dawn of time, and proof yet further that there exists within the depths of the Immaterium concepts to whom this power flows. The text stops short of calling these things what Celius is clearly building to. Gods. The implication is there, plain for all who have the clearance to see such a work, as are the marginalia, hypothesizing further that the desire to encounter such beings... And, all right, we're back. My bad. We had some audio stuff going on here, so we're just gonna pick up. Hopefully the audio is better for you guys here in the recording. So, we're only like less than 2 minutes in. I'm just gonna roll from here. Nothing really big is gonna happen, but we're gonna continue on here with the video. Clearly building to. Gods. The implication is there, plain for all who have the clearance to see such a work, as are the marginalia, hypothesizing further that the desire to encounter such beings was the fundamental driver for all human exploration and space flight. A pilgrimage to use the scholar's term, where the seeker, or species, would eventually unite with its patrons and achieve some form of ultimate apotheosis. This was Celius's final work, and while her earlier magenta-level intelligence treatise had informed many of the foundational tenets of the more esoteric branches of the early imperial regime, this latest would see her condemned.
So she's essentially saying that the idea is that humanity is always essentially, when they die, supposed to, you know, obviously enter the warp and become demons. That's just like the natural order of things. Is that what she's trying to say? That's kind of what I'm getting from this. That, yeah, I don't know.
The imperial regime, this latest would see her condemned to remaining within a sanitarium within the depths of the imperial palace for what little remained of her much shortened life. What records remain of such facilities paint a picture grimmer than I wish to elaborate upon here, but we can presume that her life, such as it was at that point one of isolation and screaming. The fate is one familiar to any who have been even remotely aware of the records kept by the Holy Ordo Hereticus, or have indeed plumbed a little bit further into the past. Throughout human history, those who have delved too greedily and too deeply into the deep dark of the metaphysical world have ended their time.
Okay, Tolkien. Okay, Tolkien. I get the reference. I get the reference there.
Into the deep dark of the metaphysical world, have ended their time on this terraqueous plane in all too similar a state to poor lost Mamsell Celius. Those who have drawn back the veil in an attempt to discern the hidden clockwork of the universe were all too easily labeled deranged lunatics once their labors had borne terrible fruit, and were locked away within the loneliest of asylums lest their rantings and ravings inflict similar fates upon others. It is a fate I fear I once came close to. One's last record upon that which is most arcane, even with the sterling preparations one took to ensure the containment of mimetically corrosive elements, was apparently inadequate. Most of you have no doubt been curious as to the lack of production pertaining to any subsequent material in this area. Quite simply, a mind needs time to recover.
Okay, so you're saying she's saying something along the lines that all religion and faith stems from the existence of the chaos gods. Okay. I get what you're saying. I just didn't know if she was also implying that by nature, when a human dies and their soul goes into the warp, that the natural state is to then transmute into some kind of demon or be devoured by, you know, a demon or something like that. I don't know if that's like what she's saying. That's just how nature's supposed to work. You know what I mean?
A mind needs time to recover. No rational one can ever hope to contain even a glimpse of the true scope of unreality. Many have tried, and many, so many, have utterly failed. Their essences dissolving into the churning seas of insanity, as that which simply cannot be unfolds its impossible truth inside them, and their very selves are sundered into a billion broken shards. The warp and the powers within are anathema in ways we cannot comprehend, for they are supernatural in the truest sense of the word. They may form a universal system, in that they are, it is abundantly clear, inextricably linked to our own material plane. That they are a dark mirror to it is the only definable thing we can be certain of. One, however, must endeavor to try.
Yeah, I still say that that's kind of what the Emperor's plan has been to try to deny the Chaos God's power, as that's the best way to fight them. So yeah, it seems pretty obvious now that whatever's happening in our reality is what's feeding and empowering the Chaos Gods in the Materium. I mean, the birth of Slaanesh is obviously the biggest proof of that. You know, with everything that the Eldar were doing that led up to that, it's kind of hard to argue against that.
One, however, must endeavor to try. Provisions have been enacted to ensure a repeat of the previous.
She also implies that all species have their own god, which even the Eldar Tau god, well, there's, you know, I mean, it makes sense because the Eldar have several gods, right? You know, Cain was their god of war. I can never remember the god's name, but the Harlequins, their god, that's with them in the webway. And then there's the goddess, the healing goddess, who's trapped in one of Nurgle's gardens. You know, so there's, you know, they have several gods. And it would be interesting if the orcs didn't the orcs at one point, didn't they have some kind of gods that came from them at some point, but because they devolved, they kind of lost their power or something. Yeah. For whatever reason, that name makes me want to say Sheogorath from the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. I don't know. That's just where my brain goes. That's why I don't try to say it, because it makes me just want to say Sheogorath. I don't know why. Gork and Mork. Okay, yeah. I thought the orcs had something. Right. Right. And they're like, yeah, aspects of the Eldar. You know, Isha's life, Kano's war, yeah, and the Harlequins, you know, so yeah.
Incident acted to ensure a repeat of the previous incident shall not occur again, and one has taken steps to ensure no form of esoteric conceptual alignment has occurred within the macro structure of ideas presented herein. What follows comes with a simple warning. The path is the same as the one trodden by countless others, and has reaped a tithe of human sanity beyond anything we could possibly imagine. Know then, that this is a record of the Theology Damnatus, an exploration of the fundamental underpinnings of the universe, a case study of the demonic. Within each and every one of us, it is now understood that there exists a soul. The theological, scientific, and philosophical debates about the nature of the soul are as old as our species. We have yawed violently between one polarity and another in contemplating its existence, from puritanical religious fires to the cold, clinical denial of atheistic beliefs. But it is known in the...
Well, this looks like a fucked up chicken, dog. I'm not gonna lie. Like, what is this? It's like the John Carpenter's The Thing got a hold of like a roost, and all these chickens just got fucked up. I'm just saying.
Old clinical denial of atheistic beliefs. But it is known in this day and age that with our human sentience comes a quantifiably unquantifiable something that is the kernel of us. Be it energy, be it spirit, such concerns are, to be frank, fundamentally moot. The fact that the soul is, and its part within the fabric of creation, is undeniable. Knowledge that has been bought with blood and earned with pain. The souls of humanity are reflected in the warp, akin, it has been said, to lights in the deep darkness of an unfathomable ocean. To draw the metaphor further, these lights attract the attentions of the predators of that ocean.
Right.
The oldest and most powerful bargains of humanity have been bartered with souls. That these were debased is absolutely correct. That they were heretical, doubly so. This is but one example of a statement that you must gird yourself to be prepared to hear. For this record will be forced to acknowledge certain truths we can but wish were not the case. The trade of souls was one indulged in since our earliest days. It would typically take the form of a sacrifice to draw the favor of a particular god. The sacrifices were often in the form of animals. These primitives, best believed, were embodying their deity, or some form of their earthly aspect.
From what I understand, though, like, I was waiting for a moment there to, like, pause it. I didn't want to interrupt them. But from what I understand, like, I get that, you know, ritual sacrifices and various other rituals can be correlated to trying to summon or get demons' attentions. But from what I understand, it's actually pretty hard to do, right? At least any of, like, demons that have any kind of real power. It's supposed to be hard to, like, actually get their attention. Like, Joe Schmo just, you know, sacrificing a goat isn't going to be enough for, like, Korn to, you know, be like, hey, dude, what's up? What do you want? What can I help you with? You know, you're not just going to get into the Korn hotline with something like that. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Embodying their deity, or some form of their earthly aspect. But it is undeniable that humans were also the victims of these grisly devotionals. The multifarious savages believed that their divinities would reward them for such acts, that the soul, the essence of the sacrificed, would be a worthy gift, or perhaps sustenance, in some of the darker and more sinister cultures. It is now understood, if such a word can be used for a concept so arcane, that it was not precisely the souls of the Animalia, nor the humans, where the power lay, but in the worship itself. The soul was currency.
That's interesting. It's the actual, worship. The actual worship and faith in the god or the greater being is what gave them the power and not the soul itself. That's kind of interesting. Isn't there still power in the soul and, like, devouring the soul? Wouldn't that still give them some kind of power? Maybe it's only temporary. You know, I don't know how that works in the 40K universe as far as that goes. But I thought that's kind of part of the whole thing with some of the chaos gods is that, you know, them feeding on a certain amount of souls is what gave them power to begin with, right? I don't know. I could be just way off base there, but that's what I thought kind of part of the, because, like, no one really knows in the grand scheme of the 40K universe. Like, if you look at just humanity alone, 99% of humanity doesn't know Korn. They don't know Nurgle. They don't know Slanesh, you know, Tzeentch by name, and they're not specifically worshiping them. So, like, if that's the case, then how does that power get, like, divided between all of them? You know what I mean? If it's not just the actual soul granting them power, but also the worshiper faith. Like, I know that there are some specific cults that worship specific gods, but I guess they would have to be, like, visited by, they would have to do something to, I guess, get attention of one of the specific lesser demons of one of those gods, and then that's how that demon, the demon would then influence that cult to do that, and then that worship could potentially give that demon greater influence, so they can say, hey, Korn, you know, I've got this cult, and they're starting to worship you to give you more power, and Korn will then grant them more power, more favors, or something like that. Maybe that's how it works, you know? But I thought, on top of just obviously the faith in something and belief in something, definitely seems to, in the 40K universe, be something that gives power to things. But like Slaanesh, I think, is also a great example. Like the Eldar weren't specifically doing their debauchery things to create this greater demon that became Slaanesh. They were just doing what they enjoyed doing, and just that emotion coalesced into and manifest into Slaanesh. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's. I feel like there's just like a lot of different kind of conflicting ideas kind of going on there with how the gods would get their various powers. Then, if it's not just, I don't know. Anyway, I guess just keep on going on with the video and see what they say.
The soul was currency, the ultimate form of coinage. Belief, veneration, faith, devotion, conviction, call it what you will. That supreme expression of ideas has a profound impact upon the universe. It is, as may well be expected, ill understood, and likely impossible to understand. But faith has moved the tides of history. The things in the warp, they feed upon belief. It is their foodstuff, their total nourishment, that from which they swell with grotesque power in their hideous realms. To the greater...
And I mean, yeah, I do get that a lot of the stuff has been kind of overall revised over time as different books and different authors and things. Like they didn't have a set plan for a lot of the stuff in the 40K universe when it was being initially written. But yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking how this stuff is, how this stuff has changed. I guess. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like, if that's the case, they would, anyway. But I guess let's just move on with the video. I have a lot of different thoughts, and I'm trying to think of how I would want to put them together, but it's just going to end up being kind of a cyclical argument with myself that I've kind of already just gone over with all those points with what I previously said with, if souls aren't how they got power, then how would they get power in the first place? Because, people aren't specifically worshiping them. So, how would they get to the power they had? And again, the example that I said of Slaanesh, like the Eldar weren't specifically going out they were doing the things that they did because they wanted to get more pleasure. They weren't specifically trying to create a greater demon. So how did then Slaanesh become if that's not what they were trying to accomplish? You know what I mean? So I don't know. Anyway.
Which they swell with grotesque power in their hideous realms. To the greater intelligences, the only true power is the sum total of souls they hold sway over.
And I guess it could be a situation where different gods can just be formed in different ways. Like Khorne is kind of the aspect of, fighting and murder and death and blood and yada yada. I guess, well, I mean, you could argue that Nurgle is also death, but, it's... War has been a thing and fighting has been a thing that has gone on in the 40K universe since the dawn of time. So, I mean, people kill and fight and whatnot all the time. So it makes sense that, that's how Khorne would be created and why, I guess, in general, he has the most sway or dominion in the I don't know if I necessarily want to say he's the most powerful, but has the most sway or dominion in the warp, so I don't know. Also aligned demons, tie to specific god, and unaligned demons, right? It's not the actual worship, it's the emotions mortals feel when worshiping that feeds chaos. It's the actions mortals take while feeling those emotions. Chaos feeds whether you worship them or not. No one's going to be shared of the god. Yeah, I mean, that makes more sense with the idea of It's the emotion behind the action that feeds them versus the actual action itself. That makes more sense. That's why the Trail of the Blood is so empowering to chaos. Right.
Those mortals who have any true power is the sum total of souls they hold sway over. Those mortals who have pledged themselves to the darkest pantheon through pacts both cognizant and ignorant. They have, across the span of all sentient species in this galaxy, attempted, to greater and lesser degrees of success, to inveigle their way into systems of belief, usurping the religious fervor of those oblivious uncountables for their own gain, honeying the pot with promises of boons and power to draw yet more souls under their dread patronages. These greater intelligences, the so-called gods, they are not the only entities within the Immaterium, merely the greatest amongst them, the loci for essential universal aspects: death and bloodshed, sensation and pleasure, change and evolution, decay and disease. Below, around, a part of these entities are the choirs of the lesser, but no less malevolent. Those aethertropic beings we have come to term, for the sake of the bluntest of all names.
You know, I'm just thinking here. It's interesting. Wouldn't you think there would be like a chaos god of like the aspect of life? Because like, I don't know. The emotion behind wanting to, you know, live, that's obviously a very powerful natural instinct. So you would think there would be some kind of like chaos god dedicated to that, right? Because a lot of the gods are just aspects of you know, various kind of elements of nature, I guess you could say, you know, death and war and fighting and pleasure and change and evolution, all the stuff that you just said. But it just kind of struck my mind that wouldn't there, it's kind of surprising that there isn't some kind of, and maybe there is, maybe it's just a lesser thing, or maybe it's an even greater power that they haven't really even gotten into, you know, I don't know. But it just kind of struck me that it's interesting that there isn't kind of something that's like an aspect of life, being that, you know, war is so prevalent in the 40K universe, and you know, the struggle to try to stay alive. I would think the emotion behind that would be more than fuel enough to have created some kind of god from that aspect. Nurgle's life as well as death. Most nature gods and religions are actually feeding Nurgle. He represents the cycle of life and death. Okay, I can see that then, yeah.
Demons. The demons of the greater intelligences are sentient in the most basic sense, possessing intelligence, perception, reasoning, and creativity. Some are not even beholden necessarily to one deity or another, being things of no especial alignment. Avatars,
right, the unaligned demons.
Base concept of the primordial annihilation. Just as the greater intelligences are fulcrums around which the clockwork of unreality turns, the lesser demons are too a part of this danse macabre, caught in the abstract whirlpools of their masters' immaterial eddies. Alana Celius posited that the greater intelligences, in much the same manner as your humble servant did previously, are self-aware storms of pure psychic energy, manifesting demons from their masses as atmospheric storms do clouds and rain and lightning bolts, expressions of the greater whole, yes, but unique all the same. A demon will act with as much agency as it is granted or able to invoke. In doing so, it acts both for its own agenda and that of its greater patron. These goals...
So, and something else that I just thought of, you know, it's interesting that how is it that like a lot of the lesser demons are able to, is it that they just possess bodies? Is that just how demons essentially are able to cross over to the Materium? Or aren't some actual demons, like some lesser ones, able to physically enter, you know, like have a physical body and enter the real world, like some of the lesser corn demons or whatever that I've seen. I forget what they're called, but you know, I don't know. I could look for a picture of them, but anyway, the idea of thought or whatever is like, you know, if some of the lesser demons are able to actually come into the material world as themselves physically, what is it that keeps a lot of the greater demons or even the chaos gods themselves from being able to do that? Is it just essentially that they kind of like lose their power, their essence, trying to get over in the material world? Or is it just that their power and essence is so great that there aren't vessels to transfer them into the material world? Or do they just not give a fuck? You know what I mean? Because I know that, like, it's the great game, right? They're all just kind of fighting each other because, you know, there's nothing fucking else to do when you're an immortal god. You know what I mean? So why not? That's something to entertain yourself. But like, yeah, do they even really care about ending a material world, or we're pretty much just like playthings to them, right? But then, like, why are they interested then in like the Emperor and the Primarchs and some of their doings? Or is it just that, you know, because the Emperor potentially reneged on a deal that they decided to get involved with some of that stuff? You know what I mean? You know, I don't know. These Sacred Open portals that can come through the Warp Rift, they can't physically exist in Materium without a way in. Chaos gods essentially could if they wanted to, but they don't. Remember, the gods are fighting their own war, and it takes up 90% of the focus. Right. Yeah. They either slip into cracks in reality, or someone by a ritual possessing a demon host. Yeah, so for the most part, it's just possession. Okay.
It acts both for its own agenda and that of its greater patron. These goals will often align, although it has been documented that such alignment is as often as not entirely beyond the ken of mortals that would choose to interact with it. Like the greater entities, they are concerned simply with souls and with worship. It is a subject of much debate amongst scholars of the arcane as to whether the aims of these entities are fundamentally malignant. Celius did not believe so, equating their behavior to nothing more than the whims of nature, and one that we could not possibly fathom, asking whether one can debate the malevolence of an earthquake. Celius did not, of course, live to see what came after her internment. She did not, in her cell in the dungeons of Terra, witness the heresy, nor the siege, nor the scouring, nor the 10,000 years of unspeakable horror the Daemonic have perpetrated with undeniable glee upon our species. If one can even begin to claim that such acts are done without a specifically wicked intent, then one is stating that the laws of the materium and immaterium itself, which these creatures are permanently bound to, is a structure so unspeakably evil by human definition as to render this debate utterly pointless. Demons, as they were in the tales of old, are by nature evil, depraved and terrible things of blackest nightmare. They are our most horrifying terrors rendered self-aware, parasitic, malignant. Some have compared the demon to a sentient idea. To one's mind, that forms as good a basis as any in attempting to grasp their nature. If the greater intelligences are clusters of macro concepts, psychic disaster pieces inflicted upon a universe they are also a part of, the lesser entities are as much fragments of these concepts as they are shards of their ultimate power. They are the tendrils by which the dark pantheon are expressed through the veil, manifested in the materium like fingers piercing a cloth. Impossible for us to see the force that directs.
All right, greater demons are basically extensions of the god and have more independence, as they are generally more loyal. Right, and they've been given more boons and more powers from them. And I know that after a certain amount of boons and powers, like, it becomes like a test of your will as to whether or not you can like handle the actual power you're given, or just be driven insane kind of a situation too. So for those that are able to keep their power and keep getting stronger. Yeah, I got that.
Them, but all too terribly motivated by some dreadful intent. At the dawn of the Imperium, these emanations were classified as hyper-predatory Xenos entities of unknown immaterial provenance. They are considered beyond the scientific ability of mankind to explain and quantify, but understood, broadly speaking, as one that simply awaited science to catch up. The Immaterium and its dangers, as well as the threat these Xenos represented, was well known.
Every time I hear the word Xenos or read it or whatever, I can't help but think of Xenomorph. It just makes me think of aliens every time.
Dangers, as well as the threat these Xenos represented, was well known, both in terms of actual Imperial policy and the deep trauma of the Age of Strife, but they were not by any means granted any semblance of the supernatural. The Imperial truth, the Emperor's atheistic philosophy designed by the Master of Mankind to lift humanity out of the degradation of religiosity, brooked no such thing. These warp creatures were Xenos, nothing more. The truth was.
So he just labeled the demons as aliens, essentially, instead of trying to cover it up, that they weren't actually demons from, you know, the warp or from another reality or realm. They're actually essentially just aliens. Interesting. I mean, it would make sense to want to do it that way if that you're trying to essentially cover it up.
A lie. The necessity of it, at least, or the intent, has been discussed elsewhere within my records to greater detail. But it can be generally assumed that the driving desire behind its implementation was to starve the denizens of the Imperium of the worship that granted them power. It was not simply enough in denying their nature specifically. The Pantheon has been clearly adept in corrupting the belief systems of sentient life in order to sup upon the emotions of the material plane. No, better all belief in the supernatural be excised at its root, preventing the warp from growing fat off the ignorant prayers and beseechments of the masses that they so eagerly cultivated. Starve them, in effect. Let them wither and rot within the tides of the Immaterium, bleeding away their power until they are but pale reflections of the bloated, corpulent psychic parasites they once were. Would that it were so simple. Anyway, I have elaborated at length upon this topic. How this pertains specifically to the demon, for the sake of clarity here, I will hereafter refer to the lesser entities as emanations, as in a lot of ways they do resemble hyper-predatory Xenos creatures, but differing in crucial ways, as much of an understatement as that is.
Emanations.
The form a minor emanation will take is subject to many factors. Lesser emanations, aligned to one of the greater intelligences, tend to follow certain baseline forms, representing what appear to be cardinal aspects redolent of the concepts their patrons embody.
Right.
Those of the Lord of Blood and Battle are typically the color of spilled vitae, and clad in primitive brazen armor, for instance, while those of they who are of rot are bloated corpse things barely containing the pestilences that ravage their not flesh.
They take on physical appearances and manifestations from the god they represent. That's essentially what he's saying.
Corpse things barely containing the pestilences that ravage their not flesh. However, even emanations beholden to the greater are not hidebound by such things. They can and will take any form that they believe or know will cause the most severe of horror within any mortals who behold them. One treatise speaks of an encounter with such an emanation, believed to be an aspect of the Changer of the Ways, that took the form, the unfortunate author recounted, of a color that was beyond description, laterally shifting to a hue that defied all comprehension entirely. Commonly, however, forms adhered to by minor emanations will be bestial in nature, or present an aspect of a cardinal, primal fear, stimulating the biological ancestral instincts within the human hindbrain to fear the predator. A substantial part of the fear they seek to cultivate.
It is interesting that, you know, he mentioned that they try to take on traits that they feel would induce as much horror as possible. So I guess that also goes to the whole feeling and emotion. They're trying to provoke the feeling of fear, you know, from the human, whatever, to get more power from them. That's how they're getting more powers through that fear. So I do think that is interesting.
However, is less due to their appearance and more to the utter sense of revulsion their sheer wrongness inspires within the sentient mind. Survivors will often recount less the visual aspects of these emanations and more the descriptions of other phenomena associated with them that affect different senses, such as the stench of putrefying meat and human effluvia, the pervasive auras of threat and malice, and movement that does not track well within the human visual spectrum, seemingly jarringly unnatural and jittery. The circumstances into which they emerge from the immaterium will also affect their appearance, as it has been documented that they will attempt to absorb matter from around themselves in order to fashion crude weapons or further enhance their stature and menace. Their size is seemingly also dependent on the circumstance of their arrival in the materium, likely in large...
So is he just saying that they can just absorb matter and, like, make weapons or implants or something like that? Is that what he basically just said?
To absorb matter from around themselves in order to fashion crude weapons or further enhance their stature and menace.
Interesting. So they can just take some metal around them or whatever and refashion it into some kind of weapon that looks crazy or whatever to intimidate someone or to make themselves look bigger or more intimidating to induce more fear or whatever they're trying to do. Interesting.
Their size is seemingly also dependent on the circumstance of their arrival in the materium, likely in large part related to the quantities of warp energy in their immediate vicinity at the time of their incarnation.
They're summoned through a sacrifice to find cultists that will use the material of the cultists to craft their body. Okay, I get that.
Major
Interesting.
Emanations have been recorded as being the size of whole hab blocks, swollen on a gluttonous feast of immaterial.
So that could, I guess, technically mean that when a demon is summoned, that might not actually be what their real appearance is. They might look like something completely different in the warp, I guess you could say, but they just use, like you said, the cultist bodies to craft something and make themselves look however they want.
Forces. Cursed discourses upon this have suggested that, through means esoteric, it is possible even to manipulate the form of an emanation before its incarnation, although such rites are of both dubious provenance and highly suspect efficacy. It is likely that the first encounters between humanity and these entities was entirely accidental. It has only been in recent millennia that substantial numbers of human psychers have begun to emerge, leading in accordance to a significant rise in esoteric phenomena surrounding potential or actualized demonic incursions. But the psychic gene has been present within humanity since our evolutionary process began. In times long past, it is now considered quite likely by scholars of our present age that legends and myths pertaining to arcane powers, sorcery, magical beasts, are all, if not actual accounts, at least derivatives of incidences involving psychic powers and these emanations.
You know, I wonder if this is something I'd thought about at some point in time, but I hadn't really talked about before or whatever in any of my videos. I wonder if at some point, like, the Emperor psychically or through whatever other means, like, turned that, like, psyker gene off in humanity for a long time in order to let us kind of, like, I guess, evolve. Because, you know, if you think about it, if the shaman theory of the Emperor's creation, birth, whatever, is correct, then at some point in time, a group of really powerful psychers would have had to have existed on Earth, and then they do the, you know, ritual sacrifice to combine their essence into one being. You know, if it's just that it's interesting that that would happen at one point in time way back in the early parts of humanity's development, and then there's a large gap kind of really between then and when psychers kind of start to reappear again. So I wonder if that's just the case where, like, the shamans, you know, knowing what was going to happen in the future and because of that, turn themselves into this one being, the emperor, and then he uses his abilities to turn off that psychic gene in humanity to essentially kind of shield and protect humanity from chaos getting a hold of them early on in the development, until he felt humanity was kind of ready to start dealing with it, and then that psychic gene got flipped back on. And it's just a theory, you know, speculation. I've never heard anything to say one way or the other, but it's just, you know, just something to think about. Right, exactly. The theory is that the Emperor was shielding humanity from chaos during everything before the Age of Strife, and during the warp storms of the Age of Strife, the shield was broken. Yeah, a lot of history, legend, and myth get recontextualized in 40K. Yeah. Yeah, so I wonder if that's just kind of what the case.
For example, the ancient Catheric hysteria surrounding possession and exorcism, once thought allegorical, must now be examined through the lens of a genuine effort to combat the other, albeit just as much as the worship driven by that selfsame religion's wanton historical violence and abuse must too be seen as feeding the same entities they believed they were denying. The victims of said possessions, or at least those that may have been horribly real, were likely nascent human psychers, coming into their power and in doing so attracting the attentions of predators within the warp.
Right.
The more unrestrained the psyker, the more of them they are, the more turbulent the immaterium grows, and the more delicious the pull of their blazing ethereal presences grow to the entities therein. Regarding, however, those who seek a deliberate means of incarnating an emanation, the most common practice in achieving said has been through some form of ritualized communion with the entity, designed to first communicate through the skein separating reality and unreality, and laterally to pierce it, allowing the emanation its transubstantiation into the mortal plane. The image of these relics is commonly known.
Man likes to use big words. I'm just saying. Using some big fancy words.
To imperial citizens. Our propaganda bands abound with picts of hooded figures daubed in viscera, chanting prayers in some dark tongue, as a sacrifice, usually a fair maiden or staunch servant of his imperial majesty, is prepared. That these gaudy reels are not far from the truth of the matter will come as a surprise, maybe, to some of you. The demonic are attracted to the horrific, as we have established. They are terror forms, the sensation of a murderous thought made all too real, an allegory of blades and pierced flesh, and wicked determination. They are stories, and in order to incarnate them, other stories must be told, through vile acts and corrupt resolution. The chanted spell, for instance, so commonly attributed as an invocation to bring forth...
I bet this creature smells wonderful.
The power does not lie...
He doesn't need any Axe body spray.
The slapping meat sounds of human throats do not possess some form of macrocosmic force behind them. No, it is the intent. The words, the spilled blood, the torn flesh, the virginal offering, the defilement of the sacred, these are the trappings of an act that focuses the intent, the belief, the emotion to summon forth something that literally feeds on all three. The ritual is the tool. It is the key. A murder does not birth a demon. A murder with a story that has power.
Okay, interesting. So it's not just the act, but I guess it's also kind of the intent of the act. I don't even know if that's the right way of saying it. Because it's like, you just kill someone to kill someone. Demons don't care about that. But I guess, like, the showmanship? I don't know if that's the proper term. But essentially, yeah, like putting on a show and making a big deal of it. That's the difference. Like, Korn doesn't care if you just kill some like dude for whatever reason. You just walk up to someone and just stab him in the face or whatever. He doesn't care about that. But if you know, make a grand showing of it, then you might get his attention. Kind of a situation. Someone looks at you in the hobby circle and say, "Are you a Nurgle player?"
Humanity has ever been obsessed with the attainment of power. This the lesser emanations know, and they are very, very adept in exploiting it, weaving their way into the lives of humans in pleasing fictional roles that they may gain power over the soul that is the focus of their temptation. Many throughout history have sought to harness this power for their own ends. That is why traditions of ritual communion and summoning have persisted throughout time immemorial. Suppressed, prescribed, put to the flame, hunted, and annihilated though such works may have been, sooner or later, a mind intent upon the acquisition of power beyond...
Bro, I feel like this weapon works against you here, man. There's all kinds of spikes and thorns jutting out from this. Like, you know, how are you supposed to grip that properly and kill someone with that, bro? Like, I feel like you need to rework your design here. I'm just saying. I'm not a professional smith or anything, but anyway.
Sooner or later, a mind intent upon the acquisition of power beyond ken will seek hidden truths and occluded answers. And it is to these minds the lesser entities are gleefully drawn, seeking ready prey to help them force their way into reality. Knowledge of the esoteric persisted because there are always, somewhere, people willing to sell their soul for the sake of power. Though these seekers may be successful in their communions, and even if their desire is incarnated through immaterial charges, these stories invariably end in disaster. With the...
I mean, so again, I've kind of asked this question before. I don't know if there's really been like a real answer, but like as far as reincarnation goes in the 40K universe, it only really happens if you're a perpetual, right? And I don't know what kind of circumstances happen that grant that power, if it's just a random happenstance at your birth where you gain that power and you become a perpetual, and like your soul can like recoalesce into a body, or your body can regenerate or something. I don't know. But if there's not really reincarnation in the 40K universe, you know what I mean? And I guess it would be a question of if someone really knows or not what happens to your soul when you die. Because like if you're just a regular Joe Schmo, right? And there is no reincarnation, and you know that when you die, your soul goes into the warp, and then it's going to be fought over by whatever demons there are. So your soul is just going to be devoured, and then what? You just disappear from existence in general. You just become food for a demon. Then it's like, you could kind of understand the want to gain some kind of greater demon's attention to get power and boons from them, because like how else would you really survive the warp? You know what I mean? And continue to exist in some form or another, other than just becoming food for some random demon or other entity in the warp. You know what I mean? So it's like, part of me is like, can you really blame someone for wanting to gain that kind of power? You know what I mean? I know it's very heretical for me to say. Don't, you know, send the Inquisitors at me. I'm just, you know, throwing stuff out here. I'm just, you know. Find the other corners of Nash War Spur. They don't mind a little pain. The Eldar could reincarnate The Eldar were reincarnate before the birth of Slanesh. Now their souls get sucked. See, and that's what I thought too. I thought I remember there being something like that with the Eldar, where the Eldar never really truly died. Until yeah, Slanesh came along, and now they've got some kind of just I was hearing some weird noise. It sounded weird through my headphones, but someone just out riding their motorcycle around my neighborhood. It just sounded weird. I was like, what the, is there like a tornado outside my house or something? What the fuck's going on? But anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, the Eldar. So like, yeah, I know they have like these little boxes where their souls get stored into now, so Slanesh can't get a hold of them. But like, yeah, I knew that they didn't really kind of die beforehand, but the best case for them is the other equivalent of the Dreadnought, but more neon genesis elegant, less walking tank. Okay. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of hard to blame someone in the 40K universe, just like the average Joe Schmo dude, to want to get some kind of more power, to have more to their life than what they probably have, and for, I guess, maybe existence to be more than just what it is, and then you die and then your soul gets devoured no matter what you do, you know what I mean? And unless there's more to it than that, and I just haven't learned it yet, you know. But from what I understand, pretty much when you die, your soul just goes into the warp, and then you're just fought over by whatever other demons until someone takes your soul and eats it. And then that's the end of you. Like, and again, I feel like that's what, I keep going back to this in a lot of my videos, but again, I feel like that's kind of what the Emperor's plan is overall, is he wants to carve out a piece of the warp so that when humans die, their souls actually have a place to go to and have an afterlife, essentially. I feel like that's something that he wants to do, instead of people just being, you know, food for whatever when they die. By observing a swirl in the crystal, they can put it in the mech. Yeah, death in 40K is horrifying, but Big E was all like, suck it up, it's for the good of mankind. Take this out while I fiddle with the webway portal. Yeah. But I don't know.
The emanation in question ultimately, these stories invariably end in disaster, with the emanation in question ultimately turning upon or betraying their master in highly creative fashions. Typically a deal of some sort is struck, often to the human's great boon, until at a crucial moment the demon will reveal a hidden clause and trap its now hapless prey. The emanations are wicked things, and there is little more pleasing to them than the grand arc of such a tale. Just as these Faustian pacts have become commonplace in human allegory, so too have they become the bedrock around how lesser emanations reap a harvest of souls. For they love nothing more than supping upon the delicious terror of a mortal falling in that one instant helplessly under their control. One must always see these acts along a trail as part of a grand narrative that the emanation specifically desires to both create and fulfill. What can be gleaned from the sequestered texts is that, despite the inevitability of their downfalls, many Diabolists succeeded in achieving some degree of mastery over emanations they had.
I feel like, why do you need eyeballs coming out of your mouth like that? I feel like all you're gonna do is, like, you're gonna bite your little eyeball tongue doing whatever you're doing, and it's just gonna be more of a problem. Like, I feel like that's not a very, like, good evolutionary trait or whatever. I think you need to, like, reconsider that. I'm just saying.
Succeeded in achieving some degree of mastery over emanations they had summoned. Such entities, incarnated in this fashion, were invariably weaker than those who emerged from the immaterium under their own devices. The commonality throughout the ages is that such beings are only as powerful as the amount of souls bartered to them, and herein we must loop back to our initial discussion on the currency of the soul.
Yeah, so this goes back to... Yeah, he's going back to, again, saying that souls are a form of power now. I don't know. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's a situation where it's both, where both the souls are a currency that can grant you power, but also the worship and the emotion and intention behind the worship gives you greater power than what the souls alone can give you. I don't know.
Such units of worth are not in simple numerical quantities. Remember, the warp predator would take a single soul over 100 if it deems the story behind the sacrifice of the former worthier.
So it depends on the soul in general. Certain souls may have more value, more power, depending on, I would assume, the person that is sacrificed and the ritual or whatever behind the sacrifice, which goes into, like, you know, a Cain and Abel situation, a brother killing a brother. That soul would be more powerful and sought after by a demon or greater demon than some random dude just walking down the street and stabbing someone in the face, like I said earlier. I get that.
But that being said, sacrifice through essences of such creatures, if there's enough of it, the sheer quantity becomes a greater story. Such is a rotten way of things. Weaker than their self-wrought kin, summoned emanations are typically focused on some arcane relic or item, the proverbial magic ring, for example, serving to ground them within the materium that they are so profoundly anathema to. They may, as we all too terribly know, also be implanted within a mortal host, either devouring the soul that once dwelt there as part of a sacrifice or rite, or even merging with it, as we have seen with the blessed sons of the 17th Legion word-bearers and all their sundry heretical descendants. Possession has been, generally speaking, deemed a safer option for the incarnation of emanations, as it provides an easily destroyed host should the summoner desire to banish a potentially unruly charge back to the warp. Before the events of the Ruin Storm during the Horus Heresy, it was believed that emanations had agency, but were ultimately directed by their masters or some ineffable will, the higher intelligences, perhaps. The actions of the traitor legions put paid to that, and in doing so cast a span of allegorical tales from across human history into question. The Neverborn had, until the darkest hours of the heresy, been paltry things compared to what came subsequently. Even the supposed incursions wrought by untrained human psychers during the Age of Strife that saw entire planets dragged into the howling vortexes of the warp, they were not compared to the metaphysical conflagration unleashed by Lorgar Aurelian. From the slaughter at Calth to the butchery of the Shadow Crusade piling atop the terror of the War Master's advance.
That's supposed to be Scarbrand.
The veil between realities wore so thin as to be rendered irreparably scant. Since those years, the ever-increasing amounts of human psychers, the constant warfare of this galaxy of ours, the resurgent tides of the dark pantheon's mortal subjects, the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Noctis Aeterna, all have combined so that we now exist upon a damnable precipice, perched atop an abyss of howling madness, picoseconds away from devouring every soul that ever is, was, and will be. The demon, the lesser emanations, they are now fundamentally different creatures to those spoken of in the dusty, doomed texts I have had to parse. They are the untrammeled malice of the Empyrean made real. That is the horror that is born of dealing with creatures that are not creatures. We can only think of them as such because we must frame them as something real in order to stave off their tendrils. But they are not real, and yet are. Immateriality is and is not simultaneously. That which is and is not colliding in a cosmic catastrophe to give birth to sentiences of blackest malevolence. They are colors on a spectrum.
Man sounds like he's about to have a breakdown.
Thoughts suspended on the corners of your lips. They are stories, and they are stories that hate us. Why even now do the Astartes go to war with blades on their hips? because the emanations of the greater, those lesser shards of a monstrous whole cannot be killed by us metastasized clumps of self-aware meat. We can be split and torn and rent. No. These emanations they cannot be pained. They must be wounded upon a level conceptual, fought with ideas and intent, even as they seek to corrupt and usurp and bleed us of our faith, our beliefs, our very selves. Why does the sword and the flame hurt them so terribly when the macro lens and the plasma annihilator barely scratch their aether stuff? They are an indelible part of a hateful universe, and they claw at the fabric, scratch at the veil, their tentacles questing and probing for the cracks, that they may sunder forth and deluge this terraqueous existence in a tide of blood and knives and hate and fear and terror and loss and pain and feverish whispers coated in kaleidoscopic cataclysm, drawing.
Man's starting to sound like an NPC out of like Bloodborne or a Dark Souls game. I'm just saying. He's getting on that rant when he's gonna start like doing that crazy like I'm insane laugh. I'm waiting for it.
Divinities clad in all agony, all of it. Resist the wards, resist to the wards. They must hold. The Emperor protects. The Emperor protects. This video and this channel were made possible thanks to the very kind donations and support from my Patreon subscribers. If you'd like to help support the channel, head on over to patreon.com/Oculus Imperia. If you'd like to receive more updates about the channel and any future videos, you can contact me or follow me on Twitter @Oculus Imperia. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, comment, let me know your feedback, and as ever, thank you very much for watching.
All right. There we go. There we go. Good video. That was Upon the Nature of the Daemonic. The Demon by Oculus Imperia. Good video going in, kind of, you know, it really gave me kind of, I guess, more of a better idea of, I guess, how demons kind of get their power. You know, it's more of the emotion and intent behind the act, and the, I guess, show behind it. The ritual kind of being more of a show of, I guess, again, intent and how much. Because it's not just about like killing someone. Anyone can kill anyone, right? But killing a loved one, killing a brother, killing your best friend, killing a family member, someone important to you, that has more power and meaning. And then on top of that, making a show and a ritual of it. You know, the act of doing that show and ritual shows your intent and want to gain power from whatever demon you're trying to perform the ritual for, right? So like it shows more of an intention and more of a loyalty, I guess, to them, you know, and that various souls, depending on how they died, and those things can have greater value and potency and yeah, just greater power and potency to the various demons, depending on, again, you know, the circumstances of their death. You know, is it a family member or a friend? You know, the more dark and horrible and twisted and terrible and whatever the act is and whatnot, the more powerful the sacrifice and the soul can be, and thus the more power the demon can gain, etc. So very interesting, very good video, kind of going over, like I said, the nature of the demons, again, by Oculus Imperia. This video I will have a link to down below in the description, and to the Oculus Imperia's channel. And again, doing this live right now, currently from our YouTube members. So if you would like to join in the discussions that we have for these videos before, during, and after, you can click the join button down below and see if any of those membership tiers would have any kind of benefit for you. But otherwise, I appreciate you guys hanging out. I hope you enjoyed the video. Appreciate you guys watching it here to the very end. Hope you liked it. If you did, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and helps the channel grow. And yeah, I will see you guys on the next one. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Talk to you later.